She stood at the entrance of the nursing home with her heart pounding harder than it had in years, clutching a small suitcase even though she didn't need it. A billionaire woman pretending to belong in a place she had no logical reason to enter, except for one. And before I tell you what pushed her to walk into that quiet building filled with strangers and lost time, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and how old are you? And let me ask you something else. What would you do if you had everything, money, freedom, choices, but still felt completely alone? Would you go this far to find real love? Her name was Eleanor Hayes, 62 years old, elegant, sharp-minded, hiding a fortune she hadn't earned through inheritance, but through decades of relentless work. But none of that mattered anymore. Success had filled her house but hollowed her heart. She had dated men who chased her bank account, not her soul, and the loneliness had grown so heavy she could feel its weight in her bones. So one night, after overhearing two younger men joke that the only honest men left were the ones too old to care about money, Eleanor made a decision that even she questioned every minute afterward. She would join a nursing home under a fake identity, Ella Hart, and see if there was still a man in the world who could love her without knowing she was rich. As she stepped into the lobby, she felt a strange mix of shame and hope twisting together. The smell of disinfectant, mixed with something warm and comforting, settled around her. A nurse with a gentle smile greeted her, unaware that the woman standing before her owned 3 medical tech companies. Eleanor tried to relax her shoulders, pretending to be just another aging woman seeking community. But she couldn't shake the thought. Was this insane? Or was this the only way left for her to find someone who saw her, not what she owned? Her room was small, but for the first time in years, she wasn't surrounded by polished marble floors or the echo of an empty mansion. She felt strangely grounded and scared. She knew she wasn't here to play games. She was searching for something people spend their whole lives begging for, real companionship. But the question burned in her chest. What if she got caught? What if someone recognized her? What if, in trying to find love, she ruined everything she had built? That first afternoon, she walked slowly down the hallway, observing the residents. Some laughed with nurses, others sat alone with distant eyes. She wondered whose story might cross with hers. Then she saw him, Daniel Brooks, 70, tall even with his slight stoop, silver hair that looked brushed by sunlight, eyes with the softness of a man who had loved deeply and lost deeply. He was helping another resident pick up spilled puzzle pieces, even though his hands trembled slightly. The moment Eleanor saw the way he spoke, patient, kind, she felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. This was a man who didn't need anything from anyone. It was written in the quiet dignity of his posture. She whispered to herself, "That's someone who knows how to love." As she approached him, nerves tangled inside her like vines. She hadn't felt nervous around a man since she was 20. Daniel glanced up, smiled politely, and said, "First week?" She nodded, hoping her voice wouldn't betray the truth. "Just getting used to everything," she said softly. "I'm Ella." Daniel introduced himself, then continued helping the resident without skipping a beat. He didn't ask what she did for a living. He didn't study her clothes. He didn't look at her like she was a puzzle to solve. He simply treated her as a human being. And that, ironically, was something Eleanor wasn't used to. Over the next few days, they began crossing paths more often, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes because Eleanor intentionally lingered in places Daniel frequented: the garden, the activity room, the tiny cafe that sold overly sweet coffee. They talked about books, about childhood, about ordinary life. She found herself laughing more than she had in years. He never tried to impress her, never tried to charm her, and that created a feeling she was terrified to admit. She could fall for this man. But the guilt of her lie followed her like a shadow. She knew she wasn't just hiding her wealth. She was hiding who she truly was. And every time Daniel looked at her with gentle interest, she felt the sting of dishonesty. One afternoon, while they sat in the garden watching a couple of sparrows bicker over crumbs, Daniel asked a simple question that froze her heart. "Ella, what brought you here?" Her breath stalled. She had rehearsed answers, all shallow and easy, but now that he asked, everything felt wrong. The truth pressed against her ribs. She wanted to tell him she was searching for someone who cared about more than her last name or her bank balance. She wanted to tell him she was tired of being admired but never truly loved. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not when she didn't know how he would react. So she gave him a half-truth. She said she was looking for peace, a slower life, a place where she could reconnect with people. Daniel nodded thoughtfully, but something in his expression shifted. He seemed to sense there was more behind her hesitation, something she wasn't ready to reveal. And oddly, instead of pushing, he simply said, "When you're ready to tell me more, I'll listen." That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the lie grow heavier. But something else pressed into her mind. Daniel had secrets too. She could tell. There were moments when his eyes drifted far away, as if he carried a grief he didn't want to burden others with. And she wondered, what was he hiding? 2 weeks into her stay, everything changed. Eleanor walked into the garden expecting to find Daniel at his usual bench, but instead she found him standing with a woman she had never seen before. Younger, maybe late 40s, stylish, confident. The woman's hand rested on Daniel's arm with a kind of familiarity that struck Eleanor like a cold wind. She wasn't prepared for the jealousy that crawled up her spine. She wasn't prepared for the fear that she might already be too late. And when the woman turned and said, "Dad, are you sure you want to stay here? You know you could live with me?" Eleanor's entire world tilted. Daniel's daughter's voice lingered in the air like an unwelcome echo, and Eleanor froze several steps away, unsure whether to keep walking or disappear before they noticed her. She hadn't expected to feel something so sharp, jealousy mixed with panic. But watching that woman speak to him so intimately stirred emotions she wasn't ready for. Daniel looked conflicted, his jaw tightening slightly as he listened, and Eleanor couldn't help wondering if he regretted being here. Or worse, if he didn't want her in his life after all. Before she could turn away, Daniel spotted her. His face softened instantly, the crease of discomfort easing as he called out, "Ella, come join us." His daughter turned, her expression politely curious, and Eleanor forced herself to smile and approach, though her pulse hammered like a drum. Daniel introduced them, and his daughter gave Eleanor a handshake that was firm, assessing, and just a bit too long, as if she were silently asking, "Who are you, and what do you want from my father?" Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. She wasn't used to being the one judged, the one doubted, the one seen as a potential threat, rather than the wealthy benefactor people tried to charm. She kept her responses gentle, warm, even as she sensed the daughter's suspicion. But beneath her composed exterior, she felt something new rising inside her, fear that the fragile bond she was building with Daniel could vanish before it even began. The daughter left after a few minutes, walking away with a backward glance that felt like a warning. When she was gone, Daniel let out a slow, weary breath. "She worries too much," he said softly, sinking onto the bench. "Thinks I'm fragile. Thinks I can't make my own decisions anymore." Eleanor sat beside him, unsure if she was allowed to ask the questions pulsing through her mind. Instead, she placed her hands in her lap and waited. "Ella," Daniel said after a moment, "you asked once why I came here. I didn't answer you." His voice trembled slightly, but not from weakness. It was from the weight of memory. "My wife passed 2 years ago. We were married 46 years. I didn't know how to live without her." His eyes lowered to his knees, and Eleanor felt her chest ache. "My daughter tried to help, but when grief fills every room of your house, you either drown in it or you leave the house entirely. Eleanor struggled for words. She felt a painful mix of empathy and guilt. He had opened himself to her, and she was still hiding half her identity from him. Over the next few days, they grew closer. They took slow walks through the garden, shared quiet breakfasts, played cards, even though Daniel always forgot the rules and laughed at his own mistakes. Something gentle and steady blossomed between them. But every time he opened up about his past, his fears, his hopes, the guilt twisted deeper in her stomach. She was falling for him, and she knew he was beginning to trust her. But he didn't know who she truly was. Not the name, not the wealth, not the life she had left behind. One evening, as the sun dipped low and washed the courtyard in gold, Daniel looked at her with an expression she had felt forming for days. "Ella," he said softly, "these weeks with you, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time." His voice shook. "I don't want to rush anything, and I don't want to assume, but I'd like to know if you feel it too." Her heart was pounding so loud she wondered if he could hear it. She nodded slowly, barely breathing. "I do," she whispered. But the truth pulled at her throat, begging to be spoken. She nearly told him everything right then, her name, her life, her lie, but the fear of losing him gripped her too tightly. The next morning, everything shattered. A nurse hurried down the hallway, calling for Daniel. He had a doctor's appointment downtown, and his daughter insisted on picking him up. Eleanor walked Daniel to the front entrance, her hand brushing his as they paused by the doors. "I'll see you this afternoon?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course," he said with a smile. "I'll come find you." But he didn't. Hours passed. The afternoon faded into evening. Dinner trays rolled through the hallways. Nurses made their rounds. Daniel never returned. Eleanor tried to stay calm, telling herself he had likely gone somewhere with his daughter. But as night settled, her fear grew too loud to ignore. Just after 9 p.m., a staff member slipped into the recreation room where she was pretending to read. "Ella," the nurse said gently, "Daniel's daughter just called. She's taking him home with her for a while. She said she doesn't think he should stay here anymore." The book fell from Eleanor's hands. He was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. She felt the ground shift beneath her. She told herself it was temporary, that he would call, that he would visit. But deep inside, she knew the truth. His daughter must have seen her as a danger, someone trying to get close to her father, and Eleanor had no way to fight back without revealing everything. She sat alone in that quiet room, her chest tightening with a grief she'd never expected to feel again. Days passed with no word. Eleanor tried to keep her composure, but the loneliness returned heavier than before. She wondered if loving someone at this age was always going to feel like a risk you weren't strong enough to take. She wondered whether she had ruined everything by hiding who she was. Then, on the 5th evening, as she sat in the garden watching the sky darken, she heard footsteps behind her. Slow, familiar. She turned, and there he was. Daniel stood a few feet away, looking exhausted, like he'd been fighting a battle he never wanted. "Ella," he said quietly, "I had to come back. There's something I need to ask you." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, eyes searching hers with an intensity she hadn't seen before. "Who are you really?"